They left a dead puppy on a city sidewalk. But a stray cat did the unthinkable. What if the stray cat mourning a dead puppy knew more than anyone realized? You think it's just about stolen dogs. Think again. The real secret lies in why the thief was so desperate, and it's more shocking than you can imagine. Subscribe, like, and listen now to uncover the truth behind the cat's unthinkable act. The blare of car horns mingled with the shouts of street vendors on Amsterdam Avenue, the usual chaotic symphony of Manhattan's Upper West Side. But on that damp Tuesday morning, an unusual silence cut through the noise. Right there on the busy sidewalk in front of the thrift store, where Mrs. Eleanor often paused to browse, a strange scene was unfolding. Drawing glances from curious but hurried passers-by, a bright orange stray cat, its fur scruffy but surprisingly clean for a street wanderer, lay curled beside a small, still form. It was a puppy, a terrier mix, its white fur patched with brown, now cold and stiff. Dead, clearly dead, left behind like an unwanted bag of trash. What made people pause wasn't the presence of death, a sad but not entirely uncommon sight in the big city, but the cat's actions. It showed no fear or indifference. Instead, it gently nuzzled the puppy's cold fur, occasionally licking its floppy ears. Then it lay down, pressing its body close to the tiny corpse, its amber eyes warily scanning the gathering crowd, a low, soft purr rumbling in its chest. It wasn't the purr of contentment, but something more like a warning, a defiant protection. "How strange," murmured a woman in designer sunglasses, pulling her curious son closer, a cat protecting a dead dog. "Maybe it's crazy," shrugged a man in a business suit, glancing at his watch before hurrying away. But Mrs. Eleanor, a 70-year-old widow with neatly pinned silver hair and experienced eyes, saw something different. She knew this cat. The neighborhood called him Marmalade because of his orange coat. He was a survivor, savvy and independent, usually keeping his distance from humans. This behavior was completely out of character. He wasn't just lying nearby, he was guarding. He was mourning. A stray cat, mourning a dead puppy. Why, what had driven this street wanderer to display such profound and baffling compassion? The question hung in the damp morning air, heavier even than the sorrow for the tiny life lost. Mrs. Eleanor Dubois had lived in her rent-controlled Upper West Side apartment for over 40 years. She'd watched the neighborhood change, evolving from somewhat gritty to chic, with trendy boutiques and expensive restaurants. But its core, the resilient spirit of New Yorkers, seemed to remain. Since her husband Arthur passed away from a sudden heart attack 5 years prior, her life had become quieter. Her children were grown with families of their own in the suburbs, leaving her with fixed routines, morning walks in Riverside Park, visits to the farmers market on weekends, and occasional volunteer shifts at the local library. She knew Marmalade. The orange stray was as much a part of the neighborhood landscape as the brownstones or the old plane trees. She often saw him lurking near restaurant dumpsters, moving with the cautious confidence of a creature who had learned to survive in the urban jungle. She'd never tried to approach him, respecting his independence, but she sometimes left scraps of food near his usual haunts. She recognized his intelligence, his wariness, and his distinct wild beauty. The scene that morning, Marmalade guarding the dead puppy, stirred something within her. It went beyond mere curiosity. It was an urge to understand, to intervene. She couldn't just walk away like the others. She felt a strange connection to the cat's irrational yet deeply emotional act. While the crowd began to disperse, swept away by the city's relentless current, Eleanor remained. She took out her phone and called NYC's Animal Care Centers, ACC. Her voice trembled slightly as she described the situation, emphasizing the cat's unusual behavior. "He won't leave," she said. "He's protecting the body." When the ACC officer, a young woman named Maria, with a kind but tired face, arrived, Marmalade was still there. The cat growled softly as Maria approached, but showed no aggression. His amber eyes followed Maria's every move as she gently examined the puppy, confirming its death. "So sad." Maria sighed, pulling out a small blanket to wrap the puppy. "Probably abandoned last night. This weather is too harsh for a little one like this." As Maria prepared to take the body away, Marmalade suddenly let out a loud meow, completely different from his earlier growl. He ran towards a large pile of trash bags stacked near a building under renovation, then looked back at Maria and Eleanor, meowing again, clearly trying to get their attention. "What is it, Kitty?" Maria asked, slightly bewildered. Eleanor felt a premonition. "Maybe we should look." She suggested they followed Marmalade to the trash pile. The cat leaped onto a large overturned bin, pawing insistently at an old canvas duffel bag stuffed deep inside. Maria carefully pulled the bag out. It was surprisingly heavy. As she opened it, a faint whimper emerged. Inside, shivering from cold and hunger, but clearly alive, were two more puppies, identical to their deceased sibling. A wave of emotions, shock, anger, and pity, washed over Eleanor. Someone had ruthlessly discarded all three newborns like garbage, and this stray cat somehow had known he wasn't just mourning the one who had died. He was trying to save the ones who were still alive. This was the inciting incident. Eleanor's decision was immediate, unhesitating. She couldn't let these tiny lives suffer the same fate as their sibling. "I'll take them," she told Maria, her voice firm, "at least temporarily, until we can find them a proper home." Her initial goal was clear: save the two orphaned puppies. She had no idea that this act of kindness, sparked by the inexplicable compassion of a stray cat, would pull her into a situation far more complex and dangerous than she could ever imagine. Caring for the two newborn puppies, whom Eleanor named Pip and Squeak, for their faint cries became a full-time challenge. Her quiet apartment was now filled with the sounds of whimpering demands for food, the smell of warm milk, and the constant need to change pee pads. She had to learn how to mix puppy formula, bottle feed them every few hours, even through the night, and keep them warm with towels and a heating pad set on low. She felt exhausted, but also found a new purpose, a connection she hadn't realized she was missing. Maria from ACC provided her with basic instructions and some initial supplies. She also expressed admiration for Eleanor's kindness and Marmalade's strange actions. "I've been doing this for 5 years," Maria said, "and I've never seen anything like it. That cat is something special." Maria promised to log the puppy's information into the ACC system in case someone was looking for them, though both doubted that possibility. She also warned Eleanor to be careful. Abandoning animals like this is illegal and cruel. Whoever did this might not be a good person. The first few days passed relatively peacefully. Aside from the sleep deprivation, Pip and Squeak began to gain strength, their white and brown fur becoming softer, and they started to open their eyes, gazing at the world with clear blue pupils. Eleanor felt a growing affection for the tiny beings completely dependent on her. The strangeness began around the end of the first week as Eleanor sat on a bench in Riverside Park, letting Pip and Squeak sleep in their covered carrier beside her. She noticed a man watching her from a distance. He wore a dark hoodie. Despite the mild weather, the hood pulled low over his face and pretended to read a newspaper, but his eyes kept darting towards the carrier. Eleanor felt uneasy, clutched the carrier tightly, and quickly headed home. A few days later, while taking out the trash in the alley behind her building, she saw the same man or someone who looked very much like him lurking at the end of the alley. This time, when he saw her, he turned abruptly, got into an old dark-colored sedan parked nearby, and drove off. She couldn't get a clear look at the license plate. She mentioned this to Mr. Sal, the owner of the small grocery store on the corner, a kind Italian man with a bushy mustache who also knew Marmalade and occasionally fed him. Mr. Sal, who had lived in the neighborhood his whole life, looked concerned. "You gotta be careful, Eleanor," he said. "This neighborhood is safer than it used to be, but there are still bad people around, especially when animals are involved. There are racket stealing purebred dogs to resell or use for bad things." Mr. Sal's words heightened Eleanor's anxiety. Were these puppies valuable purebreds stolen and then abandoned when the thief ran into trouble? Or was there some other reason someone wanted them gone? Meanwhile, Marmalade seemed to sense the tension. The cat began appearing more frequently near Eleanor's building. He didn't try to come inside, but she often saw him sitting on the low wall across from her living room window, his amber eyes watching everything. One evening, as Eleanor was preparing Pip and Squeak's feeding, she heard a strange noise at the fire escape window leading to the alley. Before she could react, Marmalade shot through the slightly open window. She'd left it cracked for ventilation, letting out an angry hiss. She heard hurried footsteps retreating down the alley. When she looked out, no one was there, but fresh footprints marked the metal steps. Someone had tried to break in, and Marmalade had chased them away. Eleanor started to feel she wasn't just caring for orphan puppies. She was protecting them from an unseen but increasingly present threat. She called Maria at ACC again, telling her about the suspicious man and the attempted break-in. Maria sounded serious. "I'll file a report," she said, "but honestly, the police probably won't do much without more concrete evidence. Do you have security cameras?" Eleanor didn't. She began to feel isolated and scared. She looked at Pip and Squeak, sleeping peacefully in their basket, then glanced out the window, where she could see Marmalade's orange form perched vigilantly on the wall. At least she wasn't entirely alone. She had an unlikely protector, an unexpected ally. But would the courage of a stray cat and the vigilance of an old woman be enough against the danger that lurked? The tension mounted, and she knew she needed to find out who was watching her and why these puppies were so important. The situation escalated on a sunny Thursday afternoon. Eleanor decided Pip and Squeak needed some fresh air and sunshine, as the veterinarian she'd taken them to had recommended. She placed them in their sturdy carrier, draped a light blanket over the top, and carefully walked towards a quieter section of Riverside Park, where grassy slopes overlooked the Hudson River. Marmalade, as had become his habit, in recent days, silently shadowed her at a distance, sometimes disappearing behind a bush, only to reappear moments later, his wary eyes constantly scanning. She found a bench beneath a shady tree and sat down, placing the carrier at her feet. Pip and Squeak were dozing. The scene was peaceful. Birds chirped, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that had clung to her all week. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe the man was just a curious onlooker or someone homeless. But the peace didn't last. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a figure approaching from the riverside path. Her heart pounded as she recognized the man in the dark hoodie. This time, his hood was down, revealing a thin, hard face with beady eyes and a faint scar on his left cheek. He walked directly towards her, a strained smile, a tempting friendliness plastered on his face. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, his voice slightly raspy. "Sorry to bother you, but I saw you had some cute puppies there." He glanced quickly at the carrier, unconcealed greed in his eyes. "What breed are they?" A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. She clutched the carrier handle. "Just mutts," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have to go now." She stood up, intending to walk away, but the man stepped into her path. "Hold on now," he said, the smile vanishing, replaced by a scowl. "I think those might be my dogs. Lost 'em last week." "You're lying," Eleanor said flatly. Fear giving way to righteous anger, "I found them abandoned near a dumpster. Nosy old woman." The man growled, reaching for the carrier. "Give 'em here." At that exact moment, a ferocious snarl erupted. Marmalade burst from the nearby bushes like an orange blur. The cat launched himself directly at the man's chest, sharp claws, extended teeth bared. Taken completely by surprise, the man yelled in pain and shock, stumbling backward, trying to fend off the clinging, spitting fury. Marmalade's fierce, unexpected attack bought Eleanor precious seconds. She screamed for help and backed quickly towards the main path where other people were present. A young couple jogging nearby heard the commotion and saw the chaotic scene, immediately running towards them. Seeing help arrive and unable to dislodge the frantically scratching cat, the stranger spat a curse violently, shoved Marmalade away, turned and fled back towards the river. Disappearing into the dense trees, Marmalade landed on the grass fur, bristling, panting, but unharmed. The cat looked back at Eleanor and the trembling puppies in the carrier, then towards the direction the man had fled, a low growl still rumbling in his throat. The young couple rushed up to Eleanor, asking if she was okay, offering to call the police. She was still shaking, but she knew what she had to do. This was no longer vague suspicion or worry. This was a clear assault. The man wanted the puppies back badly enough to use force. This was the turning point. Eleanor realized she couldn't just passively protect Pip and Squeak. She had to actively uncover the truth. Why were these puppies so important that someone would resort to violence to retrieve them? Were they a rare breed, or were they connected to something darker? She was no longer just a kind old lady who happened to rescue animals. She had become the unwilling guardian of some secret, and she was determined to discover it, not just for Pip and Squeak's safety, but for her own. She knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed help, not just from Marmalade, but from people she could trust. The point of no return had been reached. Her quiet life was truly over, and a final confrontation seemed inevitable. After the attack in the park, Eleanor had no doubt about the danger she and the puppies were in. She reported the incident in detail to the police, giving a clear description of her assailant. The officer assigned to the case, Detective Miller, a weary but sympathetic middle-aged man, took her story seriously, particularly the details about the puppies being abandoned with a dead sibling and the stray cat's unusual actions. This sounds more complicated than a typical animal abandonment case. Mrs. Dubois, Detective Miller said it could be related to purebred dog theft rings or even illegal animal trafficking. We'll look into it, but honestly, with so few leads, it'll be tough. He advised her to be extremely careful, keep her doors locked, and call immediately. If she saw anything suspicious, Eleanor decided not to rely solely on the police. She contacted Mr. Sal the grocer again. Mr. Sal, hearing about the assault, was furious and offered his help. "Nobody messes with you in this neighborhood, Eleanor." He declared Mr. Sal was well connected in the community and promised to keep an eye out, asking trusted friends to do the same. He also officially adopted Marmalade, getting him a proper collar with a tag bearing the store's name and phone number, though Marmalade maintained his wandering habits, especially his vigil near Eleanor's apartment. Eleanor also reached out to a small local animal rescue organization she had previously donated to. The director, an energetic woman named Chloe, was intrigued by her story. Chloe had experience dealing with cases involving animal abuse and trafficking. She offered to help Eleanor determine if Pip and Squeak were a specific breed. After seeing photos and hearing the description, Chloe suspected they might be Coton de Tulears, or at least possess many traits of the small white fluffy breed, which was quite expensive and currently popular. "If they are Cottons," Chloe explained, "they're quite valuable. A purebred puppy can sell for several $1,000s. That would explain why this guy wants them back. He likely stole them from a breeder or owner, ran into some trouble, had to ditch them, and now wants to recover his assets." This theory seemed plausible, yet Eleanor still felt something wasn't quite right. The attacker's desperation seemed to go beyond just money. There was an urgency, a panic in his actions. The following days passed in a state of high alert. Eleanor limited her trips outside, sticking to short, necessary errands, always feeling watched. Sal and his network of neighbors kept a lookout on her building. Marmalade seemed to sense the danger too, becoming even more vigilant, often sitting on Eleanor's windowsill — she now left it cracked open for him — or patrolling the perimeter of the building. One night, Eleanor was jolted awake by scratching at her front door and Marmalade's furious hissing from the living room. She crept out of bed, heart pounding. Peeking around the corner, she saw Marmalade crouched before the main door, back arched, fur on end, staring intently at the crack beneath it. She heard the faint scraping of metal from the hallway. Someone was trying to pick the lock. She scrambled back to the bedroom, locked the door, and dialed 911, whispering her address and the situation into the phone. While waiting, she heard Marmalade let out a piercing yowl, followed by a crash and a curse from the hallway. Then the sound of footsteps running away. When the police arrived minutes later, they found deep scratch marks on the door and a lock-picking tool abandoned on the hallway floor. The intruder had apparently been attacked by Marmalade and fled in panic before the police could arrive. This incident prompted Detective Miller to take more decisive action. He arranged for a temporary security camera to be installed facing Eleanor's door and the hallway. He also increased patrols in the area. "This guy is determined," Miller told Eleanor. "And your cat? Well, Mr. Sal's cat is quite the bodyguard." Eleanor was grateful for the help, but the fear remained. The man had failed twice, but he might become even more desperate. She looked at Pip and Squeak, now a bit bigger, tumbling playfully on the rug, blissfully unaware of the danger surrounding them. The weight of responsibility felt immense. Chloe from the rescue organization called a few days later with new information. She had posted pictures of Pip and Squeak without revealing their location on some private forums for breed enthusiasts and rescue groups. A Cotton de Tulear breeder from Connecticut had contacted her saying the puppies looked identical to a litter stolen from her home about 2 weeks prior. She described 3 stolen puppies, 2 males and 1 female, and mentioned one had a distinctive small brown spot on its left ear. Eleanor checked Squeak. The spot was there. This information was immediately relayed to Detective Miller. Now they had a concrete case theft of valuable property. The woman from Connecticut provided more details, including information about a disgruntled part-time landscaper she suspected who had disappeared around the same time the puppies went missing. Her description of the landscaper matched the man who had attacked Eleanor in the park. The pieces were falling into place, but the situation was also becoming more perilous. The thief wasn't just trying to recover stolen goods anymore, he was trying to eliminate a witness. He knew Eleanor had seen his face and could identify him. Eleanor, Pip, Squeak, and Marmalade were all in grave danger. The final confrontation was drawing near, and Eleanor knew she had to brace herself for whatever might come next. Detective Miller decided the best way to catch the suspect was to set a trap. With Eleanor's somewhat apprehensive agreement, they devised a plan. Miller leaked false information through channels he believed the thief might monitor, like an anonymous social media post about found cotton puppies on the Upper West Side seeking owner. They hoped the thief, desperate to retrieve the valuable dogs before being discovered, would act recklessly. The plan was set in motion on a Saturday evening. Eleanor stayed inside her apartment with Pip and Squeak. Marmalade was there too, pacing restlessly as if sensing the tension. Outside, Detective Miller and a team of plainclothes officers positioned themselves discreetly around the building, and in the hallway, the security camera feed was monitored live around 10 p.m. The hallway camera captured the suspect, the man with the scar, approaching Eleanor's apartment door. This time, he didn't try to pick the lock. He pounded on the door violently. "Old woman, open up!" He yelled, his voice thick with anger and desperation. "I know you have the dogs. Open the door or I'll break it down." As planned, Eleanor didn't answer. Inside, Pip and Squeak started yapping fearfully. Marmalade growled, planting himself firmly before the door. The thief began kicking the door hard. The wood splintered. Miller signaled his team to move in. But before the police could storm the hallway, Marmalade acted. The cat backed up a few steps, gathered himself, and launched his body at the lower part of the vibrating door. Somehow, he squeezed through the small gap created by the thief's forceful kick. The thief, clearly not expecting the appearance of the furry orange bodyguard, screamed as Marmalade leapt at him again, this time aiming for his face. He stumbled back down the hallway, flailing wildly to dislodge the cat. It was at that precise moment that Miller and his team converged from both ends of the hallway. Police freeze. Attacked by the cat and surrounded by police, the thief had nowhere to go. He threw his hands up in surrender, his face scratched and terrified. The confrontation ended quickly and without a single shot, fired thanks in large part to Marmalade's timely and ferocious intervention. The thief, whose real name was Frank Miller, coincidentally the same last name as the detective, quickly confessed everything. He was the disgruntled landscaper who had stolen the 3 Coton de Tulear puppies from the breeder in Connecticut, hoping to sell them to pay off gambling debts. On his way back to New York, His car broke down and he panicked, thinking the police might be looking for him. In his panic, he dumped the puppies, assuming they would die or disappear without a trace. He never expected one to die right on the sidewalk and the other two to be found thanks to a stray cat. When he learned the valuable dogs were alive, he desperately tried to get them back. Pip and Squeak were reunited with their legal owner, the breeder from Connecticut. She was incredibly grateful to Eleanor, praising her bravery and marveling at Marmalade's actions. The farewell was bittersweet, but Eleanor knew it was the best thing for the puppies. Eleanor's life gradually returned to normal, but it wasn't quite the same. The apartment was quiet again, but she no longer felt lonely. The ordeal had brought her closer to her community, to Mr. Sal, to Chloe, and even to Detective Miller. She also had a new companion. Mr. Sal insisted that Marmalade had chosen Eleanor, and although the cat still wore the collar from the grocery store and occasionally checked in there, he spent most of his time in Eleanor's apartment, basking in sunbeams by the window or curled up on Arthur's old armchair. The former stray now had a true home. Sometimes, watching Marmalade sleep peacefully, Eleanor would remember that fateful morning on Amsterdam Avenue, the image of the orange stray guarding the dead puppy. She still couldn't fully comprehend the depth of animal compassion and intelligence, but she knew that single, unthinkable act had set in motion a chain of events that changed her life, saved two small lives, and exposed a crime. In the midst of the city's indifference, kindness and courage had blossomed in the unlikeliest of places, proving that even on the coldest sidewalks, warmth and wonder could still occur.
Woman finds abandoned kittens in parking garage, but when she takes them home, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the near, empty parking garage, turning the concrete expanse into a maze of light and darkness. Sarah, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile etched on her face from years of laughter and worrying, walked her dog, Buster, a scruffy terrier mixed with a heart of gold. Buster, as usual, was pulling at his leash, his nose twitching, exploring every scent the garage had to offer. Sarah worked at Perfect Match, a local kitten rescue center. Her days were filled with the soft meows of kittens, the playful swats of tiny paws, and the satisfaction of finding loving homes for these furry creatures. However, Perfect Match specialized in adoptions. They weren't equipped to handle the intake and quarantine of abandoned kittens, a situation Sarah knew all too well. Buster suddenly stopped, his ears perked up, and let out a soft whine. He tugged his leash towards a dark corner of the garage, near a row of overflowing dumpsters. Sarah, used to Buster's inquisitive nature, followed him cautiously. As she approached, she heard a faint sound, a tiny mewling that tugged at her heartstrings. Peering into the shadows, Sarah saw them. 6 tiny kittens, all black as night, huddled together in a discarded cardboard box. Their eyes, wide and luminous, reflected the dim light. They were thin and a little dirty, but otherwise, they seemed healthy. They were just scared. Sarah knelt down, her heart aching for these abandoned creatures. She gently reached out a hand, speaking in a soothing voice. "Hey there, little ones. It's okay. You're safe now." The kittens, startled by her presence, instinctively huddled closer together, their tiny bodies trembling. One brave little kitten, though, a runt of the litter, tentatively reached out a paw, as if to touch Sarah's hand. Sarah knew she couldn't leave them there. The garage was a dangerous place, and they wouldn't survive the night alone. She carefully scooped up the box, kittens and all, and carried them back to her car. Buster, sensing the urgency of the situation, trotted obediently by her side. Driving home, Sarah felt a mix of emotions: relief that she had found them in time, anxiety about caring for 6 more kittens, and a surge of protective instinct. She already had 3 cats of her own, a ginger tabby named Marmalade, a sleek Siamese named Celeste, and a grumpy Persian named Mr. Fluffernutter. How would they react to the new arrivals? Back at her cozy bungalow, Sarah set up a makeshift quarantine area in her spare bathroom. She lined a large cardboard box with soft blankets and placed the kittens inside. She gave them fresh water and a small amount of kitten food, which they devoured eagerly. To help them feel more comfortable, Sarah even set up a small television in the bathroom, tuning it to the Cartoon Network. She remembered how her own cats enjoyed watching Tom and Jerry, and she hoped the kittens would find it soothing too. As she watched the kittens settle down, their tiny bodies curled up together, Sarah felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. Taking care of 6 kittens was a big responsibility. She felt like a mother to them, worrying about their health, their feeding schedules, and their future. 6 little lives, she murmured to herself. What have I gotten myself into? But even as she spoke the words, a smile crept across her face. She knew she would do everything in her power to give these kittens the love and care they deserved. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of kitten care. Sarah became a master of bottle feeding, a champion of cleaning litter boxes, and a connoisseur of kitten-sized mischief. The 6 little black kittens, whom she affectionately nicknamed the Shadows, quickly settled into their temporary home. They explored every nook and cranny of the spare bathroom, batting at dust bunnies, chasing each other's tails, and generally creating adorable chaos. Marmalade, Celeste, and Mr. Fluffernutter, initially wary of the newcomers, slowly warmed up to them. Marmalade, the most playful of the 3, would often bat at the kittens through the crack under the bathroom door, initiating playful swatting matches. Celeste, ever the elegant Siamese, would observe the kittens from a safe distance, her blue eyes narrowed in curiosity. Mr. Fluffernutter, true to his grumpy nature, mostly ignored them, but Sarah occasionally caught him peeking into the bathroom, a flicker of amusement in his golden eyes. Sarah, despite her initial anxiety, found herself completely smitten with the Shadows. Each kitten had its own distinct personality. There was Midnight, the adventurous one, always the first to explore new territory. Shadow, the runt, was surprisingly feisty, holding his own against his larger siblings. Soot, the cuddliest, loved nothing more than to curl up in Sarah's lap. Phantom, the playful one, would chase anything that moved, including Sarah's shoelaces. Eclipse, the quiet one, preferred to observe the world from a safe corner. And lastly, there was Raven, the vocal one, who would meow incessantly whenever she wanted attention. Sarah spent hours playing with the kittens, teaching them to use the scratching post, and socializing them to human touch. She even started teaching them simple commands, like sit and stay, though their attention spans were admittedly short. The television, tuned to Animal Planet, became a constant background hum in the bathroom. The kittens seemed particularly fascinated by the nature documentaries, their eyes wide with wonder as they watched lions stalk their prey or monkeys swing through the trees. One evening, while Sarah was playing with the kittens, she received a call from her friend, Emily, who worked at Perfect Match. Emily had heard about the abandoned kittens and was eager to help. She offered to come over the next day to give the kittens a check-up and administer their first vaccinations. The next day, Emily arrived with her vet kit. She examined each kitten carefully, declaring them all healthy and strong. She gave them their shots, much to the kittens' dismay, and answered Sarah's numerous questions about kitten care. "You've done a wonderful job with them, Sarah," Emily said, smiling. "They're also well adjusted and friendly. I have no doubt they'll find loving homes in no time." Sarah felt a surge of pride. She had worked hard to care for these little creatures, and it was gratifying to know that her efforts had paid off. But at the same time, a pang of sadness tugged at her heart. She knew that soon, she would have to say goodbye to the Shadows. The 2-week quarantine period was over, and Sarah was relieved. The Shadows had settled in beautifully, and her 3 resident cats had, for the most part, accepted the new additions. There had been a few hisses and growls from Mr. Fluffernutter, but even he seemed to tolerate the kitten's presence. Sarah began the process of preparing the kittens for adoption. She took photos of each kitten, highlighting their unique personalities and adorable features. She wrote descriptions for their profiles on the Perfect Match website, emphasizing their playful nature and affectionate personalities. She even made little videos of them playing, which she posted on social media. The response was overwhelming. Sarah received numerous inquiries about the kittens, and several people expressed interest in adopting them. She carefully screened each potential adopter, wanting to ensure that the Shadows would go to loving and responsible homes. One afternoon, Sarah noticed that Raven, the vocal kitten, seemed a little listless. She wasn't as playful as usual, and she wasn't eating as much. Sarah checked her temperature, and it was slightly elevated. Concerned, Sarah called Emily, who advised her to keep a close eye on Raven and bring her in for a check-up if her condition worsened. The next day, Raven was even worse. She was lethargic, her nose was runny, and she was coughing. Sarah rushed her to Emily's clinic, her heart pounding with worrying. Emily examined Raven and diagnosed her with a respiratory infection. She gave Sarah medication for Raven and instructed her on how to care for her. Sarah brought Raven home and isolated her from the other kittens. She set up a separate quarantine area in her bedroom, where she could keep a close watch on her. She administered the medication as prescribed and made sure Raven was comfortable. Over the next few days, Raven's condition slowly improved. She started eating again, and her energy levels gradually returned. Sarah was relieved, but she knew that the other kittens were at risk of catching the infection. Sure enough, a few days later, Soot, the cuddly kitten, started showing similar symptoms to Raven. Sarah immediately isolated her and started her on the medication. Then, one by one, the other kittens started getting sick. Sarah was exhausted. She was constantly caring for sick kittens, administering medication, cleaning up messes, and worrying about their health. She barely had time for herself, but she knew she had to keep going. These little creatures depended on her. The house was filled with the sounds of coughing and sneezing kittens. Sarah's 3 resident cats, sensing the stress in the house, kept their distance. Even Mr. Fluffernutter seemed to understand that something was wrong. He would often sit outside the quarantine areas, watching the sick kittens with a look of concern in his golden eyes. The kittens' illness coincided with a fierce storm that swept through the area. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows and shaking the house. Rain lashed against the glass, blurring the world outside into a gray, watery mess. The power flickered on and off, adding to the already stressful situation. Sarah was worried. The storm made it difficult to keep the house warm, and she knew that the kittens' weakened immune systems made them vulnerable to chills. She piled extra blankets on their beds and huddled with them, trying to provide some warmth and comfort. During the storm, the power went out completely. The house was plunged into darkness, and the only light came from Sarah's flashlight. The wind and rain continued to rage outside, and Sarah felt a growing sense of dread. She checked on the kittens, who were all huddled together, shivering. She tried to reassure them, but her own anxiety was palpable. She knew that if the power didn't come back on soon, the kitten's condition could worsen. As the hours passed, the storm showed no signs of letting up. The house grew colder and colder, and the kittens became more lethargic. Sarah did everything she could to keep them warm, but she knew it wasn't enough. Then, in the middle of the night, tragedy struck. Soot, the cuddliest kitten, who had been the weakest of the litter, succumbed to the illness. Sarah found her in the morning, curled up in her bed, her tiny body still and cold. Sarah was devastated. She had tried so hard to save all the kittens, but she had failed. She held Soot's lifeless body in her arms, tears streaming down her face. She felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Had she done enough? Could she have done more? The loss of Soot hit Sarah hard. She had grown attached to all the kittens, but Soot had been particularly special. She had been the first to snuggle up to Sarah, the first to purr when she was petted. Now, she was gone. The storm finally subsided the next day, and the power was restored. But the joy of the returning light was overshadowed by the grief of losing Soot. Sarah buried Soot in her backyard, under a small oak tree. She made a little marker for her grave, a small stone with the word Soot written on it. The other kittens, weakened by their illness and the stress of the storm, seemed to sense the loss. They were quieter than usual, and they huddled together for comfort. Sarah knew that she had to be strong for them. She had to help them recover and find loving homes. But the pain of losing Soot lingered, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. The loss of Soot cast a long shadow over Sarah and the remaining kittens. The playful energy that had once filled the house was replaced by a quiet somberness. Sarah, still grieving, focused on nursing the other kittens back to health. She administered their medication diligently, ensuring they ate and stayed warm. Slowly, they began to recover. Midnight, Shadow, Phantom, Eclipse, and Raven, though still weak, started to show signs of their former playful selves. They began to interact with each other again, batting at toys and chasing dust bunnies. Sarah, watching them, felt a flicker of hope rekindle within her. She knew that even in the face of loss, life went on. One sunny afternoon, a young couple, Emily and Ben, came to visit the kittens. They had seen the kittens' profiles on the Perfect Match website and were interested in adopting a pair. Sarah showed them the kittens, explaining their personalities and their recent illness. Emily and Ben were understanding and compassionate. They spent time with each kitten, playing with them and getting to know them. They were particularly drawn to Midnight and Shadow, the two most energetic of the litter. They loved their playful nature and their affectionate personalities. After a long discussion with Sarah, Emily and Ben decided to adopt Midnight and Shadow. Sarah was overjoyed. It was the first step towards finding loving homes for all the kittens. The day Emily and Ben came to pick up Midnight and Shadow was bittersweet. Sarah was happy that they were going to a good home, but she was also sad to see them go. She hugged each kitten tightly, whispering words of love and encouragement. As Emily and Ben drove away with Midnight and Shadow in a carrier, Sarah waved goodbye, a tear rolling down her cheek. A few days later, another family came to visit. They were looking for a companion for their existing cat and were interested in adopting Eclipse, the quiet kitten. They were drawn to her gentle nature and her calm demeanor. They spent time with Eclipse, and she seemed to bond with them instantly. They decided to adopt her. Sarah was thrilled. One by one, the kittens were finding their forever homes. It was a testament to their resilience and their adorable personalities. She still had Phantom and Raven to find homes for, but she was confident that they would soon find their perfect matches. The adoptions gave Sarah a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that even though she had lost Soot, she had helped save the lives of the other kittens. She had given them a second chance at happiness, and that was something to be proud of. With Midnight, Shadow, and Eclipse finding their forever homes, Sarah focused her attention on Phantom and Raven, the two remaining kittens. Phantom, true to his name, was a whirlwind of energy. He loved to chase anything that moved, from dust bunnies to Sarah's shoelaces. He was a constant source of amusement, his playful antics filling the house with laughter. Raven, on the other hand, was the more vocal of the two. She had a melodious meow, and she would often sing to Sarah, especially when she was hungry or wanted attention. Sarah knew that Phantom and Raven, with their distinct personalities, would need special homes. Phantom needed a family that could keep up with his boundless energy, and Raven needed a family that appreciated her vocal nature. She continued to post photos and videos of them on social media, highlighting their unique qualities. One day, a young couple, Lisa and David, came to visit. They were looking for a playful kitten, and Phantom immediately caught their attention. He darted around their feet, batting at their shoelaces and chasing after a crumpled piece of paper. Lisa and David were charmed by his energy and his playful spirit. They decided to adopt him. Sarah was delighted. Phantom had found a home where he could run and play to his heart's content. She hugged him goodbye, wishing him a lifetime of happiness. As Lisa and David left with Phantom, Sarah felt a pang of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by joy. Only Raven was left. Raven, sensing that she was the last one, became even more vocal. She would follow Sarah everywhere, meowing and chirping, demanding attention. Sarah found it endearing. She knew that Raven, with her sweet personality and her melodious voice, would find a loving home soon. A few days later, an elderly woman, Mrs. Peterson, came to visit. She had recently lost her beloved cat and was looking for a new companion. She was drawn to Raven's gentle nature and her sweet meow. They sat together, and Raven curled up in Mrs. Peterson's lap, purring contentedly. It was a perfect match. Mrs. Peterson decided to adopt Raven. Sarah was overjoyed. Raven had found a home where she would be loved and cherished. She hugged Mrs. Peterson and Raven goodbye, tears of happiness streaming down her face. With all 6 kittens now in loving homes, Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced challenges and heartbreak, but she had persevered. She had saved these little lives and given them a second chance at happiness. She knew that Soot would never be forgotten, but her memory would live on in the joy and love that the other kittens brought to their new families. With all the kittens adopted, Sarah's house felt strangely quiet. The constant meows, the playful chases, the tiny purrs, all gone. The spare bathroom, once a bustling nursery, was now empty, the faint scent of kitten food lingering in the air. Sarah wandered through her home, a bittersweet feeling washing over her. She missed the kittens, their playful antics, their warm snuggles. But she also felt a sense of peace, knowing they were all in loving homes. The silence, however, was also an opportunity. Sarah had dedicated so much time and energy to caring for the kittens that she had neglected other aspects of her life. Her garden, once a source of pride, had become overgrown with weeds. Her friends, whom she hadn't seen in weeks, had started to call, wondering where she had been. Her own 3 cats, Marmalade, Celeste, and Mr. Fluffernutter, seemed to enjoy the return to normalcy, basking in the attention they now received. Sarah decided it was time to reconnect with herself and her surroundings. She spent a day in her garden, pulling weeds, pruning bushes, and planting new flowers. The sun on her skin, the smell of fresh earth, the chirping of birds, it was all so soothing. She realized how much she had missed this connection with nature. She called her friends and arranged to meet for dinner. They laughed, they talked, they shared stories. It felt good to be back in their company, to feel the warmth of friendship. She realized how important these connections were to her. She spent more time with Marmalade, Celeste, and Mr. Fluffernutter, playing with them, grooming them, and simply enjoying their company. They seemed to appreciate the extra attention, purring contentedly as she stroked their fur. Sarah also reflected on her experience with the kittens. She had learned so much about herself, about resilience, about compassion. She had faced challenges, she had experienced loss, but she had also witnessed the power of love and the joy of giving. She realized that caring for the kittens had been a transformative experience, enriching her life in ways she hadn't imagined. She decided to volunteer more regularly at Perfect Match, helping with adoptions and fostering kittens when needed. She wanted to continue to make a difference in the lives of these vulnerable creatures. Sarah's house was no longer filled with the sounds of kittens, but it was filled with something even more meaningful, a sense of purpose, a sense of connection, and a heart full of love. She had turned an empty nest into a full heart. Several months had passed since the kittens had found their forever homes. Sarah had settled into a new routine, balancing her work at Perfect Match with her personal life. She had become a familiar face at the rescue center, known for her gentle touch and her unwavering dedication to the animals. She often volunteered on weekends, helping with adoptions, cleaning cages, and socializing the cats. She also fostered kittens from time to time, providing them with a safe and loving environment until they were ready for adoption. One day, while Sarah was at Perfect Match, a young woman named Jessica came in looking for a kitten. Jessica had recently moved into a new apartment and was looking for a furry companion to share her life with. She was drawn to a small, calico kitten with bright green eyes. The kitten was shy and timid, but Sarah could see a spark of playfulness in her eyes. Sarah spent time talking to Jessica, learning about her lifestyle and her preferences. She explained the kitten's personality and her needs. Jessica seemed genuinely interested and asked if she could spend some time with the kitten. Sarah brought the kitten to a quiet room where Jessica could interact with her. The kitten, initially hesitant, slowly warmed up to Jessica's gentle touch. She started to purr and rub against Jessica's legs. Jessica was smitten. After a long conversation with Sarah, Jessica decided to adopt the kitten. She named her Hope, a symbol of new beginnings. Sarah was thrilled. She knew that Hope had found a loving home with Jessica. As Jessica left with Hope in a carrier, Sarah felt a familiar pang of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of satisfaction. She had helped another animal find a forever home. She had made a difference. Sarah continued to volunteer at Perfect Match, finding joy in helping animals and connecting with people who shared her love for them. She also continued to foster kittens, providing them with the care and attention they needed. One evening, while Sarah was fostering a litter of orphaned kittens, she received a call from Emily, her friend from Perfect Match. Emily told her about a special needs kitten that had been brought to the center. The kitten had a congenital condition that affected her mobility. She needed extra care and attention. Sarah didn't hesitate. She immediately offered to foster the special needs kitten. She knew she had the experience and the compassion to provide the kitten with the love and support she needed. The next day, Sarah picked up the kitten from Perfect Match. She named her Lucky because she believed that every animal deserved a chance at happiness. Lucky was a small, gray kitten with big, expressive eyes. She had difficulty walking, but she was full of love and purrs. Sarah set up a special area for Lucky in her home, with soft blankets and easy access to food and water. She spent hours with Lucky, playing with her, cuddling her, and helping her with her exercises. She was determined to give Lucky the best possible life. Lucky's presence brought a new dimension to Sarah's life. Caring for a special needs kitten was challenging, but it was also incredibly rewarding. Sarah learned to adapt her home and her routine to accommodate Lucky's needs. She created ramps and soft landing spots to help Lucky move around more easily. She spent hours massaging Lucky's muscles and helping her with physical therapy exercises. She researched Lucky's condition extensively, seeking advice from veterinarians and other animal lovers who had experience with similar cases. Lucky, despite her physical limitations, had a spirit of steel. She was determined to live her life to the fullest. She would often surprise Sarah with her resilience, finding creative ways to overcome her challenges. She developed a unique way of hopping and scooting around, exploring every corner of Sarah's home. She loved to play with toys, batting them around with her paws and chasing after them with surprising agility. She was also incredibly affectionate, showering Sarah with purrs and cuddles. Sarah grew deeply attached to Lucky. She admired her strength, her determination, and her unwavering spirit. She saw Lucky not as a disabled kitten, but as a survivor, a fighter, a testament to the resilience of life. She felt a profound sense of responsibility for Lucky's well-being, and she was committed to providing her with the best possible care. One day, while Sarah was a perfect match, a family came in looking for a special needs cat. They had experience caring for animals with disabilities, and they were looking for a companion who needed a little extra love and attention. Sarah immediately thought of Lucky. She told the family about Lucky's story, her challenges, and her incredible spirit. The family was intrigued. They asked if they could meet her. Sarah arranged for them to come to her home to spend some time with Lucky. The family fell in love with Lucky instantly. They were impressed by her resilience and her affectionate personality. They saw past her physical limitations and recognized the beautiful soul within. They decided to adopt her. Sarah was overjoyed. She knew that Lucky had found the perfect home, a family that would love her unconditionally and provide her with the care she needed. The day the family came to pick up Lucky was bittersweet. Sarah was sad to see her go, but she was also incredibly happy for her. She hugged Lucky tightly, whispering words of love and encouragement. As the family drove away with Lucky in her carrier, Sarah waved goodbye, a tear rolling down her cheek. She knew that Lucky was embarking on a new chapter in her life, a chapter filled with love, happiness, and endless possibilities. Life, Sarah realized, was a series of beginnings and endings, of joys and sorrows, of gains and losses. The kittens had come and gone, leaving paw prints on her heart. Soot's memory remained, a bittersweet reminder of the fragility of life. But the other kittens, thriving in their forever homes, were a testament to the enduring power of love and compassion. Sarah continued to foster kittens, welcoming them into her home, nurturing them, and preparing them for their new lives. Each kitten brought its own unique personality, its own challenges, its own rewards. Sarah embraced them all, giving them the love and care they needed to flourish. She stayed in touch with some of the families who had adopted her foster kittens, receiving updates and photos, sharing in their joy. She learned that Midnight and Shadow, the energetic duo, were thriving in their new home, filling their days with playful antics. Eclipse, the quiet one, had blossomed into a confident and affectionate cat, bringing joy to her new family. Phantom, the playful one, had found a home where his energy was celebrated, his antics a source of endless amusement. Raven, the vocal one, had become a cherished companion to Mrs. Peterson, her melodious meows filling the elderly woman's days with music. And Lucky, the special needs kitten, had found a family who adored her, her physical limitations no barrier to their love. Sarah's home was once again filled with the sounds of kittens, their playful meows and purrs a constant reminder of the circle of life. She knew that each kitten she fostered would eventually leave, but she also knew that she would continue to open her heart and her home to others, providing them with a safe haven, a loving touch, and a second chance at happiness. Sarah's journey had come full circle. She had started by rescuing 6 tiny kittens from a parking garage. She had faced challenges, she had experienced loss, but she had also witnessed the transformative power of love. She had learned that even in the face of adversity, there was always hope, always the possibility of new beginnings. And she had discovered that the greatest reward in life was not what you received, but what you gave.